Welcome. Today's post is Cat Eyes and Abraham Lincoln. Published on August 11, 2023. You could take a dartboard and put every famous person ever on it, and odds are, if you threw a dart, no matter which celeb you hit, you'd find news stories somewhere about them and cats. Consider Abe Lincoln. He had 2 cats, and in digging into those cats I unearthed something shocking. Here are the topics we'll be decoding today. You can always find this list in the description below. If you enjoy this video, please press the like button, and subscribe for weekly full-length blog posts, and shorter, more shareable videos. Let's begin. Note, you can also read this post on Twitter. See link in description. Is there any symbol more prevalent in the world than cats? You could take a dartboard and put every famous person ever on it, and odds are if you threw a dart, no matter which celeb you hit, you'd find news stories somewhere about them and cats. Like Abe Lincoln. President Lincoln was the first cat owner in the White House. He got cats from his Secretary of State and fed them at a formal White House dinner with a gold fork. Does this mean anything as a com? But before we can answer any specific com, we should decode cats themselves as a com. I decoded dogs with high confidence long ago. February 11, 2021. 8-year-old border collie named Lulu inherits $5 million. February 11, 2021. Biden cuts off Trump's billions used for border funding. See why this com has to exist. The sudden shutdown of the border wall funding needed a com to communicate why it was happening. That the money wasn't being pocketed. But every time I tried to decode cats, my conclusions were never confident like that. Thankfully, I am always studying, and many comms that were once out of reach are no longer. I've recently started to decode comms I failed at in the past. I didn't fail this time. Cats and tech. The quick answer is the symbol of cat is in the eyes. Specifically in the cat's ability to see in the dark. To see that which is hidden. Take The Witcher. The main character has a power of cat's eyes. And it's said that they are what allow him to track criminals. The thing that made this com tricky to decode is how often cat symbolism is tied to sex. June 26, 1974. 9 Lives of Fritz the Cat, sequel to first ever X-rated cartoon movie. June 26, 1974. Emmanuel famous X-rated film first by company. This includes in The Witcher. Practically the first thing he does in the first game is sleep with a witch. This is memorialized in a picture Geralt keeps with a cat in a suggestive position. I realize now this correlation is not because cat equals sex, but because sex is typically kept secret. Kept dark. The cat eye symbolism therefore is an ability to see that which is kept hidden and is the perfect pair to any hidden com. It's just sex is a common thing to hide. This is why a lot of cat comms are not tied to sex specifically, but surveillance. April 1, 1976. Apple founded in parents' garage, $666. April 1, 1976. Cat-Eyed Boy anime starts. Cat-Eyed Boy hides in attics and witnesses horrible things. Choosing to help or hurt them after spying. Cat-Eyed Boy hides in attics. It may explain this meme. Apple sold at a price of $666 and was a reply to the Church Committee looking into CIA illegal acts. This makes sense only with context of the other technologies of the day introduced. Selling satanic computers as a way to continue networked ops without fearing arrests for skirting the law. Computers with proto-internet began the following year. Note Gates and Jobs both being at the start. This also fits the symbolism of a cat chasing a mouse. January 19, 1983. Apple first introduces the first mouse with Lisa system. March 25, 1983. Michael Jackson Moonwalker debut. One glove equals one hand mouse use. May 2, 1983. Microsoft introduces their first mouse. As in a computer mouse. If that Moonwalker symbolism didn't make sense to you at a glance, I go over it in other posts. The symbol of a sliding dance with one glove was the new way to use a computer. Think about how different using a mouse is than a keyboard. These are comms defining the act itself. Moonwalker symbolism being the difference between keyboard and the new mouse movement. Apple began with Steve Jobs, who worked at Atari Games first. Chuck E. Cheese was bought by Pizza Time Theater, which introduced Michael Katson in 1984. Right as the comms about moon and cats and mice were hitting. Only one glove, mouse equals one hand. April 26, 1977. Studio 54, Celebrity Sex Club starts, Russia plus Mossad as covered in prior posts. May 17, 1977. Likud, Netanyahu, wins the first victory over left wing in over 30 years. May 17, 1977. Atari co-founder founds Chuck E. Cheese. Moreover, we can take these Apple Plus game comms into recent years. Apple releases Siri in 2011. In The Witcher we have Siri first mentioned in the games in 2011 as well. She becomes the main focus of the newest game as you raise her into a cat-eyed witcher or empress. A game focused on tracking criminals and sex. As in online tracking. Especially in relation to pornography websites. In the games you pursue women or go into brothels, and after sex they leave him with evidence of the encounter in the form of nude cards. Reconcile online tracking and pornography websites. The central plot of the newest game involved helping Siri, training her. Reconcile with Siri, the Apple data collector built into everything. Which brings us back to this meme. Though I'm sure Apple is not the only one. Take a closer look at that X-rated Fritz. An update to Felix the cat. A symbol I'll go over later. Made by a guy who, after hitting it big with the pornography cartoon, look at that box office. 90 million in 1972 for Fritz the cat. He then made a 1977 cartoon movie called Wizards, about a war between magic and technology in a post-apocalyptic world. The next, Cat's Eye, in Japan. July 11, 1983, Cat's Eye anime debut. July 11, 1983, Reading Rainbow starring actor tied to mechanical eye vision in Star Trek for 23 years. July 11, 1983, Stolen Bass Record. +4. July 15, 1983, Nintendo first Famicom released, NES. July 15, 1983, Sega first console. First episode of Reading Rainbow. About a poor kid adopting a cat. Picked up by Mrs. Macintosh instead of his parents. This was the same year Apple, Macintosh, released Lisa, revolutionary new GUI-based system. Comms of watching children and tied to games for children. Most popular kids game today. Roblox. November 9, 2006. Reading Rainbow ends after 23 years. November 10, 2006. Roblox employee releases first trending Roblox game trailer starting hype among kids. Transition of surveillance. The most obvious example in pop culture of this cat icon. A show about alien cats, and the most consistent power in that show is holding metal up to cat eyes to get sight beyond sight, and see whatever they wish anywhere. That does beg the question of what exactly they were sending comms for back in 1985. September 9, 1985, Thundercats. September 13, 1985, Friday 13th Super Mario Bros. Debut Japan. September 16, 1985, Steve Jobs forced out of Apple. Thundercats plot is about seeing threats of a pyramid-themed enemy with the Sword of Omens, using metal to do so. I've had trouble in the past interpreting Nintendo's role in things, but the surveillance comms are always consistent. The Steve Jobs timing is interesting given the Atari/surveillance history. Prank calling the Vatican is also interesting given factions. Both those last 2 points were tied to using phones illegally. Something connected to ops tied to him back then. It's all comms, I suspect. He was robbed at a pizza parlor, which brings to mind his famous pizza order. The very first order of pizza online. He was kicked from Apple and then made a comeback with the company Next. Note the X and T capitalized. I can't be sure on the T, though I do know T equals being the church cross. Which in turn is tied to funding, and so it's possible it was asserting the next big funding. Bigger than the other guys. But X. I have been trying to solve X comms for weeks now, and that was already my strongest hypothesis about it. X can represent many things, but in this context it's akin to an X in a relationship, i.e. a comm for people who have been removed from some entity. To invoke X as a company is therefore to gather together others also banned or rejecting the same thing. Sound familiar? This gives us the likely symbol for the new Twitter. It fits perfectly given his stated goals in relation to the mainstream. The whole pitch of the Xbox was to go against Japan. So it was effectively sucking up anyone wanting to go X with the established parties in that industry. Also works with PSX because Sony's whole shtick early on was being the replacement for Nintendo. Works especially well there if you read my decode of the original partnership between the two. That doesn't mean every X means X, but many likely do. Defining someone as an X of any given thing. Why can certain people talk freely? Social media cats. Clearly cat eye symbolism is tied to surveillance, but what about famous cats? The most famous cat in the world right now by some measures is Nala, a top Instagram and TikToker. Is it being exceptionally good at posting a cat? Or as usual is there a comm in this? To solve this one I had to scroll all the way back to the very beginning. The very first post. I've only this week found a trick to do this, as Instagram literally does not let you do this normally. First post was March 12, 2012. What else happened that day? March 12, 2012. Los Angeles, Nala the cat first post Instagram. March 12, 2012. Los Angeles early premiere, Katniss Hunger Games first film premiere record-breaking opening. Kids/teen movie. LA/LA cat and both record-breaking with kids. What is the point? To answer that. Production company for cat/cat is Lionsgate. A big cat. Anyway, in this movie/book Hunger Games, the entire way to win the Hunger Games is make the audience enthralled by the story. To play up the drama to win the audience of the Hunger Games, i.e. social media. Reconcile that with Nala and coffee owned by Pookie and Ping, Net Ping. Nala the shelter cat is focused on helping other shelter cats. This is likely a comm for the use of Instagram with pretend drama to send messages about ops in progress. I cover these all the time. Each one a cat's eye into news they have 17 data on. Transcribing into comms that become actual news stories if they do it well. Hunger Games emphasizes the want for drama regardless of reality. That's how you win. First month, more viewers equals Nala gets closer. That fourth and final update they did on their rapid growth with 222-2222/222 was the same day the Cat King, Lion King, Broadway musical took the spot as highest grossing musical of all time. That may be coincidence, I'd need to decode the musical itself. Pop culture cats. Cat's eyes used as symbolism for technology monitoring is frequent. September 19, 1994. Microsoft beats Apple in Lisa lawsuit. September 12, 1994. Catbert introduced in Dilbert, evil head of technology. September 11, 1994. Lisa Simpson loses to rival and both lose to handicapped son of police. If ties into blackmail comms. October 16, 1923. Walt Disney founded. October 16, 1923. Alice in Wonderland series begins Walt Disney with Felix the Puss. November 15, 1923. Felix first chairman of KGB begins. Something the KGB is known for. I looked at a number of other famous cats. For example, the character Midnight the Cat on the 1950s Andy's Gang kids show. A few interesting things about this one. The catchphrase of the kids' show, "Plunk your magic twanger, Froggy," became a catchphrase to denote sex. A character noted to delight in shaming political figures and millionaires. Notice the original host died suddenly of a heart attack. July 22, 1954. Virgin Islands Constitution. July 23, 1954. Smilin', Ed McConnell heart attack. July 24, 1954. USA first ever win in Miss Universe. The show was consistently sponsored by Buster Brown shoes. Shoes are a symbol of a job. The character, Buster Brown, is from an older 1902 comic. The boy main character cross-dresses and is disturbingly pretty boy with the first ever talking pet in a comic. Take all those details together plus 1902 comic. That gives us the comms used to coordinate the blackmail ops I often go over during that time frame. Teddy Roosevelt had cats, but I'll be getting into POTUS pets a bit later. Another famous cat. Orangey, cat from Breakfast at Tiffany's. The cat has no name because the main character of the film decided to only name her cat when she achieved her goal of getting a rich husband. This was a role originally intended to go to Marilyn Monroe. October 5, 1961, Breakfast at Tiffany. Orangey the cat movie based on Truman, CIA head. October 4, 1961, The Alvin Show, CBS first series with the singing chipmunks. Recording children. Her past at being a child of 13 being married. Cat trained by an equals hotel. The Alvin connection is because 1958 Jimmy Savile debut radio. 1958 David Savile debut radio. Origin of chipmunks, Teddy, kids plus recording. A reader dug up this next one. December 1967, Cat's Eye Boy manga. December 1967, The Graduate, famous movie about a rich woman's affair with a much younger man. This was the top movie of 1967. He ends up with her daughter, Kat. Profile pic same year with Kat. August 5, 1983, Cat's Eye single. August 5, 1983, Risky Business premiere, Tom Cruise breakout role about sexual exploits of high school senior. Risky Business had his famous underwear dance scene often parodied. The point being these are both movies with big age differences in situations where revealing the sex would ruin a rich and powerful person. The exact kind of thing you would expect ops to be, and so it corresponds with foreign data collection, Cat Eye Boy. The collection of the data. August 15, 1977. Wow! Signal, famous message from outer space. August 15, 1977. Amy Carter, daughter of President Jimmy Carter, with her Siamese cat Misty Malarkey Yang. August 16, 1977. King of Rock died bathroom. Chinese, foreign equals alien, data employed. Another famous presidential cat. August 4, 1962. Marilyn Monroe death. Plus 17Q. August 21, 1962. Tom Kitten dies. I actually predicted this date differential when I dug into it. You might too if you thought about the context of each in relation. I'll explain. JFK was allergic to cats, as in getting reported scandals about sex. Marilyn Monroe was just about to talk about scandals with the Kennedys. That was likely the original way they were going to remove JFK. Instead, she likely agreed to leave. Necessary due to mob ties. The most famous Marilyn Monroe moment being the wind gust blowing her skirt up. Symbol of speaking about sex with the press equals powerful. This ties into the cat's name being Tom. Tom was the actor who played the husband tempted by Monroe in the film. Not just the film, but he played the same role for the 3 years it was on Broadway. A fact that was promoted with the trailer as it was the record-breaking of its day. Not only that, but Tom was typecast into that role in many other films. Tom was therefore synonymous with cheating husbands during JFK's era. At least one of the films involves underage sex used as a bargaining chip. A couple of Fitzgerald adapted films as well. One of by Francis Ford Coppola. The film right next to Godfather Strings. His final appearance being in 1986 just before Chernobyl. Monroe popularized diamonds and was the original Playboy model. Her connection as the original choice for breakfast at Tiffany's, a literal diamond store, makes the symbolism for the unnamed cat that much more tied to Kennedy. One of those Tom books was Tender is the Night. April 12, 1934. Tender is the Night Fitzgerald/Zelda book. April 13, 1934. The Big Bad Wolf. Seduced by Rosemary, thoughts of an affair with young starlet in Hollywood ends with his ruin. He becomes a monster. Big Bad Wolf. Cat Eye Glasses. August 4, 2023. Google honors Altina Scanasi, creator of Cat Eye eyeglass frames. Amazing timing on that. Mentions Marilyn Monroe wore cat eye glasses and breakfast at Tiffany's promoted them. I covered this before. August 4, 1962. Marilyn Monroe death. Plus 17Q. August 21, 1962. Tom Kitten dies. It also mentions she worked with Salvador Dali. This is interesting to consider around the same time he made his famous flying cat picture. The original plan was to blow up a duck with dynamite. But instead they threw water and cats. As for the meaning here, Dali's Three Flying Cats is dated 1948, the same year he announced a return to the Catholic faith, developed nuclear mysticism, and went to Spain. Sounds like cooperation with CIA nuclear, blackmail, program. In Breakfast at Tiffany's they are called Manhattan Project. The real clue to decode these is the origin story given for them. Exactly why she created them. These awful glasses look like the time of Benjamin Franklin, so she was inspired by Harlequins, i.e. Italian clowns, for a new shape. Why does mentioning Ben Franklin matter? June 6, 1752. Third Great Fire in Moscow in 2 weeks, 1/3 of city destroyed. Plus 4. June 10, 1752. Benjamin Franklin uses a kite key to collect the fire of lightning. It meant Ben Franklin was the face of the ops that had infiltration in Russia, and they had just set it on fire. Likely Russia had been meddling with colony affairs and this was the counterattack. They would have abandoned USA ops and send troops back into their homeland to deal with the country burning down. Ben Franklin was famously international. The first diplomat from the USA. Cat eye glasses equals Ben Franklin modern redesign. We still want eyes in other countries, but a modern variant. Having eyes in hidden and potentially dangerous places for ops. The technology revolution allowed this. Though this may not be the exact intention they refer to. Lincoln and John Wilkes X2. He had a dog that was assassinated shortly after he was. Unless that was an incredible coincidence, it shows his pets were used for messaging. Lincoln received his cats from his Secretary of State August of 1861. The first ever in the White House. He stated his cat Dixie was smarter than his whole cabinet. This was the same month Lincoln first signaled he was moving towards an end to slavery with the Confiscation Act. The following month. The cat Dixie was a gift from his Secretary of State, August 1861. November of 1861 The Trent Affair. Charles Wilkes, nephew of John Wilkes, famous London mayor, abducts 2 Confederate diplomats from a Royal Mail ship to London. John Wilkes. Does that name ring a bell in the context of Lincoln? This was the same month Our American Cousin play hit London. November 8, 1861. Trent Affair. Wilkes, John Wilkes of London, nephew. November 11, 1861. Our American Cousin hits London. This of course being the play John Wilkes Booth assassinated Lincoln at. At this point what you are seeing could easily be coincidence, but this is just the start. The history of John Wilkes' nephew abducting a Confederate diplomat during the Trent Affair is a likely calm, but for what? October 15, 1858. Our American Cousin debut. October 16, 1858. Famous chess game, sacrificing on the 17th move. 1865, the same year Lincoln was murdered, we get the first, Sweeney Todd, a movie about a murderer that tricks patrons into eating people. It does date back to before this, but note they don't use the name, Sweeney Todd, in the title until 1865. First Wilkes and now Todd. Mary Todd being Lincoln's wife, the one with him at the play. She famously goes insane afterwards and tries to kill herself. Mary is also the name of the co-conspirator to Lincoln's murder and the very first woman ever to be executed by the federal government. So what does this all mean? It means we need to take a very close look at the events surrounding Lincoln's death and final days. There is clearly a message woven into history through comms here. Like the 6 co-conspirators, one named Mud as in dirty person. The cat's name, Dixie, also the name given to the South itself, and a famous song of indeterminate origin, asserted to be tied to the Snowden family. I'm not suggesting a connection with the modern Snowden, I just found the name curious, might have a comms meaning tied to secrecy. Anyway, his cat name was Dixie. I'll take my stand to live and die in Dixie. Lincoln played the song of the same name at the surrender of Robert E. Lee just before his assassination. Right after surrender, Lincoln was murdered by John Wilkes Booth in April. Even though the war was officially over, the fighting continued well into May. This is a critical point to understand, as we need to think about the mindset of the war in relation to what happened after. If you aren't following what I'm hinting at, this is where it's going to get blunt. Did you know Lincoln had been to a play John Wilkes starred in? November 9, 1863, Lincoln watches play starring John Wilkes Booth. Comments on Booth's threatening lines. What happened right after? November 9, 1863, Lincoln watches play starring John Wilkes Booth. Comments on Booth's threatening lines. +10. November 19, 1863, Gettysburg Address, commemorate a new national cemetery. Message of speech equals ideals are worth dying for. Remember that John Wilkes, nephew of Wilkes, the Confederate diplomat, abducted. John Wilkes Booth equals a comms agent for the Confederacy. Abducted as in taking a Confederate agent and using them. Note Abe Lincoln had already seen Our American Cousin, the play, and hated it. Now let's reconcile the play itself. Lincoln is heavily reported to be at Ford's Theater. The assassination takes place in the 3rd act. Some interesting plot points I highlight. Mary being the focus. The conclusion to the play is everyone gets married south plus north. The meaning becomes clear only when you realize the atmosphere. Especially the comms tied to Sweeney Todd. This whole concept of a butcher being revealed to the public. That the public are taking part in a horrifying thing, eating people. Revealing the monster. Perhaps the only way to end slavery was to create a spectacle. Note the famous catchphrase of Sweeney Todd. I'll polish him off, of his victims. As in making them shine as a star. Given Lincoln is almost always ranked at the top of all presidential polls. The surrender didn't end the war, it continued even a month after the assassination, but what effect did that assassination have? I think it was a bucket of cold water on the South. Making it shameful for anyone to even begin to think about fighting. Moreover, Lincoln had just replaced his own vice president with a former Confederate state senator. Effectively giving the South control. The point of creating the monster. The media demonized Lincoln, this is why it was necessary to make a celebrity like Wilkes the trigger man. A way to counteract propaganda by making the media itself part of the demon. Note his final day, Lincoln talked about a recurring dream he had about with the future president after Johnson. Moving with great rapidity toward a dark and indefinite shore. I decoded another famous assassination with similar telltale signs. Check that linked post if you want to see the comms tied to this. In this Lincoln case, however, the abduction by Wilkes is key. Especially the British connection. It's hard to fathom just how much money was in slavery, and the brainwashing necessary to keep that system alive is where much of it was spent. The abduction was likely in taking control of Wilkes' booth and possibly even literally replacing him. The story itself in the play being about the worst pies in the world. Pie being a coded op, and in context a symbol of intentionally creating a monster. Note the very final thing Lincoln did was cuddle with his wife, making it as tragic as possible. That was the public version. Another version by a family friend is his last words were a desire to move far away to another country. Our American Cousin, play by Tom Taylor. Johnson takes over as a tailor. Notice imagery of him as a tailor mending the country. Tailor being the symbol of doing exactly that. It's worth noting when it happened there was only one person on stage in theater. It was timed as such so that people wouldn't know what happened. There are numerous news stories chronicling Mary Todd's psychological decline. This may have been done in an effort to further reinforce the tragedy to the South. But it's hard to be sure. These revelations put symbols tied to Lincoln in question. October 19, 1860. Lincoln starts growing his famous beard. -4. October 15, 1860. Lincoln gets letter from 11-year-old suggesting he lengthen his whiskers. +5. October 20, 1860. Grizzly Adams, famous beard, returns home, circus. +5. October 25, 1860. Grizzly death. There's surely a lot more I could dig up here, but I'll move on. I actually started this dig not from cats, but the Hong Kong Central Bank. I never did finish that dig because I found something so massive, but I do want to mention it for a few reasons. March 3, 1865, British Hong Kong Bank. April 14, 1865, Lincoln murder. A few things make this curious. For one, this ability to set up the bank was the result of the Opium War, which was the origin of the Roosevelt family fortune. This is particularly curious given January 31, 1865, Congress passes 13th Amendment abolishing slavery. February 16, 1865, Yoshi, judo master of Teddy Roosevelt born. March 3, 1865, British Hong Kong Bank. April 14, 1865, Lincoln murder. The Opium War is said to be the other great international crime of that age alongside slavery. I can think of many possible reasons for this correlation, and that includes coincidence. It's the kind of thing that requires more digging. I've decoded plenty confidently, so I won't haphazardly guess on this. For now, it's kind of a placeholder. Cat Eye News. Here's a link from a reader. February 2, 2012. Someone's been eating their carrots, the incredible cat eye boy who can see in the dark. Notice the description is given as eyes just like a Westerner. For the miraculous cat eye boy that can see in the dark in China. This was originally reported in 2009 but only became highly reported, and a meme, years later. There are many ways to solve a comm. The best way to start is looking at the origins. If that doesn't work, then the next place to look is when it became popular. In this case that'd be 2012 when it was discovered and recirculated. So let's take a look at that. January 20, 2012. Chinese cat eye boy rediscovered, can see even in complete darkness. January 23, 2012. United States v. Antoine Jones, court rejects police using GPS, global, monitoring on criminals. A comm that China will be able to track the criminals post-court decision. To further test it. January 23, 2012. Secretary of State John Kerry gets 2 black eyes and broken nose, playing hockey. January 23, 2012. U.S. Supreme Court GPS ruling to stop tracking criminals. Just as U.S. Gov loses eyes, there is a rediscovery of Chinese cat eyes. Note also the original video is Alien Disclosure Group. The situation was literally in losing sight of criminals and a message of how local tracking could shift to foreign using other methods. Likely those methods are social media, but I can't be certain of that. Here's another cat lead from a reader. Turns out a famous part of that Madeleine McCann abduction story was that she had cat-eye syndrome, which when reconciled with the eternal search for her leaking iris, cat-eye plus abduction victim equals a way to send a message about the secret practices in a known context. Established symbolism reapplied to changing times. Easier to reuse a symbol than endlessly make new ones. I suspect it was created to define a specific type of victim that couldn't be publicly named, or whose name wasn't known, over a long period of time. This is just a hypothesis for now. Madeleine McCann's rare eye condition coloboma explained. Presidential cats. According to a search, the most famous White House cat was the Clintons' cat, Socks. Despite my best efforts, I've not been able to fully decode this cat, but I have solved an important part of the com which I'll go through. Socks the cat and Buddy the dog were the only famous Clinton pets. In the game starring Socks, part of it involves kicking the former presidential pet out. There's a clue in that, as you'll see when I contrast the presidential pets of 3 administrations. January 20, 2009, Obama inauguration, after beating Clinton. February 20, 2009, Socks the cat death, Clinton family. January 4, 2009, India the cat death, W. Bush family. This is the first of many curious timings related to the 2 famous pets of Clinton and Bush. The dog Socks kicked out. Millie. May 19, 1997, Millie death, Bush family, most famous dog in the world. August 7, 1997, Buddy dog born, Clinton family. Just like with the last one, it seems to be a transition of power kind of thing. January 20, 1993, Bill Clinton inauguration. April 10, 1993, Ranger H.W. Bush dog death. May 19, 1997, Millie death, Bush dog. August 7, 1997, Buddy Clinton born. January 20, 2001, W. Bush inauguration. January 2, 2002, Buddy Clinton death. Transition of power comms. This becomes even more clear when we get into W. Bush pets. The W. Bush cat, India, was named after a Texas Rangers baseball player when H.W. Bush owned them. Records of this player. India, Texas Ranger player. 1986-1992, Texas Rangers, Bush years. 1993-1999, other teams, Clinton years. 2000-2001, Texas Rangers, Bush returns. That is far too precise to be coincidence. It's not just the cats and dogs matching up with their replacements from the next administration, but their own namesakes in sports. This may give us a clue on Socks. Socks starred in an episode of Murphy Brown. After Murphy the reporter sucks up to the Clintons, the cat stows away with her. I feel there may be a clue in that they also spelled the cat, Socks, like White Sox. Which makes me wonder if it's another baseball comm. Another clue is the namesake for Socks, which is a 1973 book, Socks. About the old family pet needing to learn how to share space with the new one. This being Watergate years, it's interesting to reconcile Clinton's past with that. Hillary Clinton was on the staff of the Judiciary Committee during Nixon impeachment. A situation Nixon resigned rather than see through. My original hypothesis about India the cat was it being a symbol for India. Support of the military. This might explain why the Bush family kept DIA even while Clinton was president. This fits my decodes of the law enforcement of the time. Waco and 4/4 November 17, 2019. First COVID-19 case November 17, 2019. Hong Kong police siege 1,300 arrests. Conversely, Socks may be tied into government assets connected to technology. Clinton, when I took office, only high-energy physicists had ever heard of the web. Now even my cat has its own page. I identified patterns, but interpreting is not always easy. I remember when I decoded Walker, Texas Ranger pilot. First year post-Bush, and they explicitly defined Walker as old-fashioned cop and needing help from a partner handling technology. I watched that Murphy Brown Socks the Cat episode for clues. It had a joke about how when everyone is asleep cats secretly run the electrical equipment. Much like the origin of HRC's child-raising book, I'm sure there's a com in it, but I'll save it for another day. Mean cats. Here's another cat com sent in by a reader. October 10, 2012. Cat Mario PewDiePie. October 10, 2012. Star Citizen announced 500K Kickstarter. October 10, 2012. Cat Mario PewDiePie. PewDiePie was the top YouTube channel for years, and Cat Mario is a famous rage game. Star Citizen infamously has strung players along with big promises. Currently at 500 million from crowdfunding. Comms suggest it was a known scam from the start. And to really understand we need one date. October 10, 2012, Star Citizen announced. October 11, 2012, Bravely Default Square. A game famous for one thing. A plot twist where the players learn they had been strung along the whole time following a liar and the only way to win is to bravely default, as in to bravely stop. Default is also a word used to stop making payments. But the symbolism is clear. Much like with Cat Mario, as it's a game designed to never be won. You have to die hundreds of times to make inches of progress. It's a torturous experience where you are meant to give up. As far as Cat comms, this one doesn't connect in the conventional way like the others I covered. It's more tied to the 9 lives symbolism as you die constantly. The most common use of cat symbolism is tied to the unique pupils for dark sight. Effectively representing night vision, i.e. seeing the hidden. It can technically be used to define anyone comms aware, as that is also seeing that which is hidden. But context is key. There are many variants tied to seeing what is hidden in a context of sex. Including child variants. Like the cat of Alice in Wonderland. With the famous author tied to nude photography. Dream photographs. Kitty bank. Or the Japanese variant Hello Kitty with no mouth to talk. Originally a coin purse. Kitty being another way to say bank. Given the emergence in the mid-1970s, it may tie into the shifting role of hiding Brady evidence overseas. Brady has several definitions in a legal context. Evidence that helps prove the guilt or innocence of a person and is not turned over at the time of trial. I.e., it symbolizes things like blackmail that is intended to never see the light of day. I.e., seeing what is hidden. Which is why the show is over the top clean. The kitty carry-all, as in holding the info. The first episode ended with taking the children and Alice the maid on the parents' honeymoon, with the last part being making sure not to forget the cat. Going back to the Hello Kitty connection. 1975, Hello Kitty introduced as coin purse. 1975, Takubin, top home delivery in Japan proposed and developed. Now that may not seem like a strong connection, until you look at their logo and history closely. An adult cat carrying a child cat. As recognizable in Japan as Coca-Cola is in the USA. Reconcile the popularity of Hello Kitty as the second highest selling media franchise by sales. Black kitten delivery / white cat no mouth to talk. The fact they launched a prototype Q just before 1977 is interesting. So is their endorsement of Kiki's delivery service. A movie about a little witch and her black cat. When I looked into this I found a curious connection. 1989, Kiki's delivery service, big budget cartoon film little girl with talking pet leaving home and meets Ursula, hero. 1989, Little Mermaid, big budget cartoon film with little girl with talking pet leaving home and meets Ursula, villain. I don't think Ursula is a common name for these two movies that already shared attributes like both being famous animated movies about little girls leaving home. Studio Ghibli is basically the Disney of Japan and Little Mermaid is the start of the Disney Renaissance, as it's called. I'm not sure what to make of this fully, but I think both films were tied to new ops related to computers. October 10, 1961, Little Mermaid voice born. October 10, 1961, MLB second expansion draft. New teams representing a new push. I suspect there was some kind of radio to computer transition for ops tied to young girls. A few reasons for that. One being I've decoded ops prior to computers as being primarily ham radios. And the computer boom hit Japan in 1985, same year the book they built the movie off of was released. Movie starts with radio listening and the protagonist wanting to leave to her witch duty early on a perfect full moon rather than planned date. Symbol of hearing new ops and moving towards being a part of them. Something comms-aware people would have a coming of age for. A major reason computers went mainstream was the transition into GUI-based computers, as in not text-based DOS but allowing visual design. The first of which was the Lisa system by Macintosh. I mention this for two reasons. Lisa was the voice for Kiki for foreign audiences. Last name microphone plus son, as in Next Generation. Moreover, 1985 the book hit, same year the computer boom hit Japan. I.e. when average comms-aware people upgraded their ability to send comms with computers. Another reason, and perhaps far more telling, is the fact that in Kiki a plot element is her use of her father's radio. And then she is asked to turn it off. Later she loses her ability to hear her cat as well as her magic, but eventually finds a new inspiration, allowing her to hear again. Being able to hear her cat is a representation of magic itself. Climax of movie is her having moved to a new land and rescuing a boy from a Hindenburg-style crash into symbol of Big Ben. This is how she gets her ability to fly again. That is a symbol likely tied to the 1980s tech transition from west to east I often decode. The data ops moved to prevent leaks. Though to back up a bit. What exactly is she symbolizing in delivering? Well, just before getting her first delivery she laments running out of money and looks at expensive, red shoes, in the window. Red shoes is a symbol Q went over once. But that doesn't mean red shoes always equals perversion, as comms are all contextual. The symbol is a little more nuanced. Symbol of a ticket to ops and rewards that come with it. Not necessarily sex, but that is something some ops could tie to. The moral part of the story is about being spoiled, as in after getting wealth and power due to their ticket they ruin it. So Big Ben was used as a symbol. 1862 Alice in Wonderland inspired by children date on boat ride. 1862 Big Ben begins keeping time, symbol of keeping a record of actions, i.e. blackmail. Big Ben is especially tied to Peter Pan. November 1902, Peter Pan original story. November 1902, Teddy Roosevelt origin of teddy bear. This is especially fitting for Japan given the history. He literally had a judo master, but that's in other posts. Anyway, in the original Red Shoe story, after she gets red shoes she is adopted. Just like how right after Kiki talks of being poor and getting red shoes she gets her first job. What she is given to deliver is herself. Or an identical cat to her own. She loses the doll on the way, and so she has to have her cat act as though it's a doll, kind of like if it were sedated. All while Kiki's new friend Ursula uses a needle and strings to fix the stuffed cat Ursula. Puppetry comms. The family dog secretly cooperates with the cat to make the switch. She then talks about how Ursula wants to draw her picture, and the cat jokes about it being a picture of her nude. Remember, she's 13. I skipped over a transition because it makes more sense after hearing that last bit. Note when she gets the delivery with the cat between her legs, she makes a special note to fly high enough so as to not get caught by the police. When I brought some of my initial findings to my readers, one dug deeper. I do have a hypothesis on this connection, but I need to spend more time on it before sharing. Clearly there's something here. Some kind of comm being sent by both companies with different perspectives on it. You can tell from this the enormous progress my students are making. I didn't make that collage, or this one. Another, Ursula, a reader dug up. I didn't do this research. This is someone taking my methods and pushing into new territories. It's awesome. Even so, I'm not actually sure what to make of it. They've identified a fascinating pattern tied to shells and voices in relation to Ursula. One more from them. But let's get back to cat comms. HADJI Decoded. April 7, 2021. Keith Hernandez's funny cat, emergency, tale leads into Mets' first home run of season. This was a request I got years ago and never could solve it. Now I have cat as a symbol solved, but it's not enough just to know that symbol. To decode this, I have to decode Keith Hernandez and then reconcile the cat comms. Keith Hernandez is most known in pop culture for his guest role on Seinfeld. When decoding, it's important to pay attention to patterns. Keith is number 17 and played 17 years in the MLB. The episode is the 17th and deals with Q/17 plotline parodying JFK conspiracy theories. Specifically dealing with the true shooter and mistaken identities. Not just 17. Episode ranked 4th best episode of all time by TV Guide. Jerry Seinfeld commentated on 4 innings of a Mets game tied to this episode. Hernandez was the 4th number ever retired by the Mets. His cat HADJI is 4 generations removed from an Asian tree leopard and interrupted the 4th inning of a baseball game. He has the most famous mustache in baseball history. Mustache comms vary depending on the type, but the most common version I've seen is to hide the nose/nose. When combined with other patterns, his use as a symbol becomes clear. September 26, 2012. Top music channel on YouTube, your favorite Martian disbands. September 27, 2012. Keith Hernandez shaves off famous mustache. Martian symbolism is for foreign agents. His accent and name, Hernandez, give a misconception about his background. His nickname was even Mex. February 12, 1992. Keith Hernandez, world-famous mustache, Seinfeld, the boyfriend, mistaken identity, conspiracy, President JFK. February 13, 1992. Simpsons, the lover, mistaken identity plot with President Woodrow, next episode equals pro baseball. President/president. Boyfriend/lover. Baseball/baseball. Mistaken identity/mistaken identity. Mustache/mustache. The B-story plot involved a bet with Ned Flanders shaving off his mustache. People think you are hiding something. The quick answer is #17/Q. Keith Hernandez symbolizes a hidden identity. His most famous baseball moment was 1986 World Series. I go over 1986 a lot. Know what happened during the 1986 World Series? October 18, 1986. U.S. World Series. October 18, 1986. Japan Series baseball begins. October 27, 1986. U.S. World Series ends on Game 6. October 27, 1986. Japan Series ends on Game 7. Same time. After checking a number of other years, it doesn't overlap in other years, only this one. Coordination and timing equals message about changes going on with tech and data. The shift to Japan from Russia mirroring. November 13, 1989. Keith Hernandez granted free agency. November 13, 1989. Judge rules Nintendo owns home rights to Tetris. Symbol here with Keith gaining free agency connects to cells tied to USSR gaining the same. November 1989. Fall of the Russian-built Berlin Wall. November 1989. Tetris released Russian game about walls, game published originally by Robert Maxwell. His cat's name, HADJI, is from the Indian adopted orphan boy on Johnny Quest. Another symbol for foreign agent smuggling. September 18, 1964. Johnny Quest. September 21, 1964. Malta becomes independent. September 22, 1964. The man from UNCLE origin of Mission Impossible. All of this gives us what we need to decode HADJI. April 6, 2021. Keith Hernandez cat emergency overshadows Mets' first homer of season. April 6, 2021. Army sergeant hiding identity needs help bringing rescued cat to USA. Compare these two stories, the meaning becomes clear. The interruption at the home run was to bring attention ASAP in the need to help an agent in need. Keith Hernandez cat emergency, key jammed in the door and I am not sure I'll be able to get in my house tonight. Contrast with the military story. Military desperate to bring a hurt cat and avoid legal reprisal from the military while doing it. Story is telegraphing everything I've said about the symbolism. The more comms repeat the same message equals the louder the message. His catchphrase, "I'm Keith Hernandez," plays into the symbolism of a mistaken identity. Since the point of the name is misidentifying the person. Who does this guy think he is? Because remember he's not Mexican, he's Scots-Irish, and yet his nickname was Mex due to his last name. I also notice his first Instagram post was about his dog, Duncan. That Simpsons episode tied to him involved a yo-yo craze which kicks off the entire plot. I get the feeling if I dig here I might unlock yo-yo comms, but that'll be a dig for another day. Extra Section 1, Embassy Cat. Here's an easy comm to identify but not necessarily easy to decode. Or at least it will be obvious in meaning when contrasted with one other story. April 11, 2019. Julian Assange arrested and off to court after 7 years in embassy with cat as only companion. April 12, 2019. Julian Assange's embassy cat reported missing. April 12, 2019. Complaint filed against famous cat Miska Bellevue's most persecuted tabby cat now seeks her day in court pursued by Mueller. The cat part of the symbol is obvious. But even if we know the symbol, that doesn't mean we can decode the entire story with just that. Have to study the articles and reconcile history to get it. The Mueller mention in the article as a long-time pursuer is particularly interesting. It's an absurdly long article for a simple cat story, but then I suppose this is a complicated situation. Mueller had a dog comm assigned to him. September 4, 2001. Mueller FBI Director. September 4, 2013, Comey FBI Director. June 21, 2013, Obama nominates Comey to replace Mueller as head of the FBI. July 21, 2013, Mueller two-dog assumes mayor role in California. But that last part is irrelevant to the comm in question. I just wanted to show how common this is. Focus on the simple things that can be picked up and reconcile with history. You know who Mueller is, you know who Assange is, you know what a cat comm is. What is being said? A few things that jumped out at me. April 11, 2019, Assange arrest. April 12, 2019, Miska DC cat complaint filed. March 22, 2019, Mueller special counsel ends. Plus 1 month. April 22, 2019. Reported, Miska DC cat persecuted by Mueller seeks day in court. Especially the timing on Mueller. The special counsel was supposed to remove Trump, built up for years, but instead ended with a win for him. This is because Mueller flipped, and it explains the details in the report about Mueller going after the cat. Cat equals seeing in darkness, so it's a symbol for Assange as an op. The case against Trump was tied to WikiLeaks getting HRC emails, which is what helped Trump win. The DNC hack by Russia was critical to the case. Cat is named Miska Russian Michael equals microphone comm. The story was timed exactly to the 1-month anniversary of Mueller to update what was going on with Assange. They even used the exact date of his arrest as the date the complaint against the cat was filed. As for conclusions, it points out for now it's in legal limbo. So it's asserting that they aren't sure what will happen. Of course, with as much time that has passed, there was a conclusion. May 4, 2022, owner of Miska, the notorious Bellevue, Washington cat, wins $125,000 settlement. Owner of Miska, the notorious Bellevue cat, wins $125,000 settlement. Dating back to 2014, Regional Animal Services of King County, contracted by the City of Bellevue, issued violations for claims that Miska trespassed, taunted other pets in the neighborhood and commit. A conclusion like that likely means there was good news for Assange around that timeframe. So I look at what was reported then. Yes, one huge positive piece of news for that case hit that day. Durham. Judge decided to look at Clinton evidence. Looking at the evidence hidden by Clinton, privilege, is the win for Assange. Either that or there was other news I didn't find, but this case is tied to Assange and this was big news for it. So it'd be a huge coincidence if not. Interestingly, that's the same day as this case. May 4, 2023, Miska wins case. May 4, 2023, Murdaugh, 2 others indicted. I already decoded that Murdaugh trial as a comms vehicle, but I had not been able to pin down the precise meaning. Alex Murdaugh, 2 others indicted on additional charges. A South Carolina grand jury issued 3 indictments against suspended Lowcountry attorney Alex Murdaugh and 2 others Wednesday. I've gone over it before, and while there are great conclusions in that post, I never came to a strong conclusion on that one. I'll dig into it later. Meme cats too. More generally, the simple, seeing what is unseen, calm can apply broadly to comms-aware people online. Each famous meme cat pushed online has a unique calm to be invoked. Keyboard cat equals typing and likely a symbol for someone coordinating traffic online. Long cat is similar. Note driving poster, all-time top team, plus Japanese plus watch. Symbol for team of people coordinating net traffic long distances plus watch, i.e. timetable. Notice keyboard cat also has a watch in the background. Both imply a timely delivery. Note both these 2 famous meme cats and the grumpy cat with dwarfism died recently. This may imply whatever prior activities they were tied to have changed, but that would require more digging. That symbol of international team is shared by Nyan cat. Song is computer voice repeating Japanese meow thousands of times. The inspiration equals Russian blue cat. Russian cat with Japanese voice flying in space with stars. Pop-Tart equals quick. Rainbow comms Japanese teams tied to Russian tied to cats. February 7, 1936. Felix the Cat movie, most famous early cartoon. February 5, 1936. Nippon Baseball, top Japan sport. October 16, 1923. Disney founded. October 16, 1923. Alice in Wonderland with Felix knockoff Walt Disney. November 15, 1923. Felix first KGB head. 2021. Famous rapper, Banks, digs up dead cat named Lucifer to preserve remains. Lucifer is also a telescope described in 2010 as sees through darkness to most distant observable objects. Which I suspect is a symbol for collected evidence. Same day 44, Diamond, hospitalized, and the pet store guy made the head of GameStop. Soon after she hypothesized she would soon die in a car crash. Which is how flips are moved out of the way. February 22, 2021. Prince Philip fake obituary. February 24, 2021. Statue of Queen Elizabeth beheaded, head has not been recovered. April 9, 2021. Prince Philip death. Jeffrey Epstein, dies at age 66, 6 months. Prince Philip, dies at age 99, 9 months. It's a pre-planned show. This is one of hundreds of comms I frequently show that make that crystal clear. Check some of my other posts if you want to know where this is all leading. I'm not always right, but even so, I'm always refining my techniques and finding ways to better verify what is objectively true. Heck, long ago I was certain the official history with Lincoln was correct and this screwed up at least a couple of decodes, but this post fixes that and then some. I never thought to question that bit of history, but doing so untied a major knot. So let's keep going. I won't rest until reading comms is like breathing. I kind of hope things get fixed before that, but I also think it's important that, just in case, I make dang sure I'm doing as much as possible at all times. I never want to regret one day that I didn't do enough when it mattered. The last 5+ years every day is testament to that. You can continue on the path you are by reading more posts or even start decoding yourself. That's what my Telegram is for. Telegram chat. Join the Decoding Telegram group. This has been Cat Eyes and Abraham Lincoln.